Hello, I'm Andrew Susskind, and I'm a therapist and author based on the west side of Los Angeles since 1992, specializing in trauma and addictions. Welcome to my podcast, named after my recent book, It's Not About the Sex. Here we have honest conversations related to compulsive sexual behavior and trauma, all from a sexual health perspective. Our intention is to offer fresh viewpoints and practical strategies toward establishing greater intimacy and a more deeply connected life. Let's begin. Klifton Fehr is a licensed mental health counselor, certified in international professional coaching, and a certified group psychotherapist. This is his biography as he shared it with us. I was adopted by a beautiful couple upon my move to South Florida from Louisiana. My father, Dr. Scott Fehr, and my mother, Ellen, provided me with an environment where I could not only live, but thrive. Being the son of two therapists, the standards were high. My grandmother was also the founder of the Birthing Canal therapeutic process within the Greenwich Village community of New York City. I struggled with severe depression, which manifested in the form of suicidality and chronic isolation. Not really understanding and not knowing how to overcome that, I relied heavily on my new adopted family. The initial plan upon coming into my parents' lives was to begin nursing school and find a career in healthcare. Instead, they asked, "Have you ever thought of becoming a therapist?" So, welcome, Cliff. I'm so glad that you could join us today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I really appreciate the invite and just the opportunity to share some space with you. This is a really cool opportunity. Thank you very much.
The opportunity is definitely mutual. So I have some questions for you. And one thing I want to share just from the get-go is that I don't know if we've ever had a corporate or executive coach on our podcast. So you're number one for that. And I know you also have training. Yeah. And I know the audience can't see that, but Cliff is excited to know that he's number one when it comes to coaching.
Insert fist pump.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. So one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about was how you ended up getting into this field. I mean, what were the precipitating events that led you into the psychology field?
You know, I'll say this, Andrew, the wild thing that was taking place prior to me getting involved in corporate and executive C-suite professional development coaching, right? Before I got into that, I was working ferociously to master my own respective world as a clinical director at a treatment program, all while being the program director and the national family program director. I was working a lot, and needless to say, I'd bumped my head a couple of times on this idea of burnout. Not that that's a real thing for anybody else, but definitely for me. Mm-hmm. But I had become somewhat, stretched thin, because I was also doing my CGP certification through AGPA and IGPA.
Can you talk about the CGP for a quick second? What does that stand for those who don't know?
So the CGP is an international certification. You become a certified group psychotherapist. The name itself was just really enticing. Not to mention, my father is a CGP and also a fellow of AGPA. So I definitely wanted to at least kind of move in that same area or environment that my father has been moving as far as his development is concerned as a group psychotherapist. So I decided to get credentialed.
It sounds like your father is part of your inspiration. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that.
So a couple of things. While I was kind of like fighting through that respective burnout, my dad was looking at me with all sorts of concern because he really felt like I wasn't doing a very good job of kind of taking care of me, while also being the best that I could be as a leader and a therapist at this drug and alcohol treatment program. So I decided that I wanted to go out and hang my own shingle. Now with the CGP certification, At that time, this was back in 2020, 2019. At that time, I felt like I was, secure enough with my own license and credentials that I could step out into the private practice world. My father has been a group psychotherapist for, oh God, almost 50 years. He just retired this past January. And Dr. Scott Simon Fehr and his wife, my mother, Ellen Fehr, they both really have been the guiding rods in my life as it relates to individual health, mental health, as well as professional development. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for kind of paving the way as a therapist, because both of them are current therapists.
I mean, it's a beautiful story. I don't know that many sons who would speak about their parents as mental health clinicians in the kind of glowing terms that you are. Sometimes actually when there's a psychologist in the family, the kids run in the other direction. So
oftentimes I have.
So it just depends on where the wind blows, right?
Well, truth be told, they're a cut above. They really are unique people. Both kind of moving and transitioning to South Florida from Greenwich Village. So that alone kind of adds a different zest, zeal, or twist on who they are. Very open at the top. I really couldn't see myself not pursuing some image or likingness or likeness of my parents, because they really are phenomenal people. And I say that without some type of bribery or encouragement. Definitely a whole lot of bias, but they really are awesome people, not just in the way that they ran their business as therapists, but also how they've shown up as human beings in this world.
So you've really not only been inspired, but you've taken the ball and run with it.
Man, just some big shoes to fill. My mom was Elizabeth Fehr. My grandmother, was one of the pioneers in the birthing canal experiential approach to therapy. She was a fierce woman of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. And she definitely instilled a lot of that, or as much as she could, in both my father and my mother. So just some big shoes to fill, especially with Dad being a writer about the subject matter of group therapy. I feel like there's always more that I can do as a member and a participant in this family.
So it really goes back a few generations, and I hear that there's some pioneering that your grandmother and your parents have really started certain ways of research and writing and everything that it takes to, not only be clinicians, but also academics.
They really have, Andrew. I feel humbled by the amount of work that's involved in the development for yourself as a therapist, as a clinician. I feel it necessary that we, ultimately become students of the craft or of the science of psychology. And I've watched my predecessors, do that day in, day out, and really embody this model of being the lifelong student. I see my peers who are operating at their best, really never taking a day off as it relates to their own professional and personal development. So who am I to not fall in line with that if I aspire to be at least someone who can attempt to hold a candle to some of their work, i.e. yourself, my parents, my grandmother.
So one of the things that I'm curious about, because I really want to introduce you as best I can to our listening audience, is how has mental health in general, group therapy, and also addiction work, how has all of that taken shape for you over the years?
So it's interesting because me cutting my teeth in those various arenas or working with those respective populations prepared me for work within the corporate world. Being able to take severe and persistent mental illness and introduced the idea of having fierce conversations in the workplace, I really find that it's been really trippy to see how parallel that can be, because you have to have a degree of strength in those developed or derived boundaries that you set with clients, as it relates to behavioral challenges or antisocial behavior, right? Like some of those same therapeutic approaches, with clarity in deriving some goals in treatment, they do show up whenever you're working with high-powered CEOs or C-suite executives. Hey, listen, I need you to be on time. I want you to make sure that you commit to doing the work that we're going to do in coaching, just as well as I would expect the same thing from my clients who are struggling with activities of daily living. So I've watched those parallels really play out in a really remarkable way. But it's come because of the fact that I've had the opportunity of working with, those various different populations, ranging from severe and persistent mental illness all the way through to substance use and family systems and the family program with various treatment programs. So it's been oddly familiar yet weird at the same time to see all these parallels kind of play out.
And how about recently? What's your current focus?
Currently, and as a matter of fact, I'll say this: I'm up in Toronto dealing with, not dealing with, but actually engaging with one of my corporate clients up here. They have a office for one of their regions here in Toronto. So I'm here working with one of their regional leaders in order to really start digging deeper into some of their challenges that they're having with, having difficult conversations, challenges with cohesion as a team. And that's something that we deal with in group therapy. Also dealing with some of the intra-departmental conflicts, right? So like those things are very real for corporate America, just as they are real for us as individuals trying to live our lives as human beings in our own microcosm as well as macro, right? So my hope is that the training and the development that I've had an opportunity to experience both in AGPA as well as under the Fehr, within the Fehr household, I can take that and offer that up to corporate America, and it's something that gifts them some additional insight and some tools and resources they wouldn't have necessarily had access to had it not been for a certified group psychotherapist coming in as an executive coach.
So how did you get started with the corporate coaching?
So ultimately, the pandemic was difficult for us all. And, a lot of us as individuals who may have had the exposure to therapy really had to start making some changes in the way that they viewed therapy or interacted with it, such as virtual therapy and not necessarily being able to have that face-to-face physical contact with that therapist. Physical meaning being able to get a handshake or some type of, physical presence in front of them. And immediately during the pandemic, that was right when I had stepped out into my own private practice and hung my shingle. So February 21st of 2020, fast forward to March 16th of 2020, between the start of my private practice, which was February, to the pandemic hitting and closing everything down beginning March 16th, I was at a bit of a loss. Like, how do I now get traction and grow a practice? Well, unbeknownst to me, I had befriended my number one champion, separate and apart from mom and dad, but my personal and intimate champion. And he introduced me to a company that he was very familiar with and encouraged me to provide that respective company with some support and in order to help them get through the struggles that the pandemic was providing as a therapist. So things like crisis management and crisis intervention, suicide management and suicide intervention. And that began my journey into the corporate world, that one invite and encouragement to support those respective teams.
And just out of curiosity, are you running into any addictive, compulsive issues with any of your corporate clients or within their systems?
So, I got to be careful how I answer that. But what I will say is that, people are definitely people across the board, whether it's in the corporate structure or
Mm-hmm.
it's in the quiet recesses of private practice.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our own respective challenges that we're uh, working through, or vices that we're struggling with, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's success or the bottom of the barrel. It's very real for us all. So I hope that answered your question without answering your question.
Well, I'll tell you where it came from. I imagine that the parallels between private practice and other mental health settings are really very similar to what happens in the corporate world. It's like you said, we're all human. We all have our challenges and issues. And so it was just something that struck me, as we were talking about this, that really all of your skills are transferable. So you've taken them to a corporate setting, and everything that you have under your belt benefits folks in that setting.
Okay, so I'll dig a little deeper into that then. Had it not been for having a good familial support system, I really feel like there could have been a flare up of historical challenges or struggles for myself as far as depression and or any other type of particular substance use, just as a default, because we ultimately look for those pressure release valves, especially whenever we're under such direct and immediate scrutiny, within the C-suite executives. We
Mm.
need those breaks. We need to be able to do some self-care. And oftentimes when we can't see opportunities for us, for ourselves, we can reach for the extra container of Haagen-Dazs, or a quick, and dare I say, a quick bump of Coke, in order to just like get ourselves moving and not stuck in
Mhm.
the circumstantial minutia. And that may hit some of those high performers
Mhm.
in some ways that either they don't know or maybe the rest of the world doesn't understand,
Mhm.
just as much as it could hit, the lower SES.
Mhm.
Um, so it's really weird. Like it doesn't matter what kind of garb you wear every day. Like it
Right.
can impact all of us the same way. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did that
So
answer your question?
absolutely, absolutely. I think what comes to mind, and I think this is important to distinguish, is that coaching and counseling are different. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the differences.
One of the things that shows up as being, a finite difference for me as a coach versus me working with someone in the therapeutic process is I tend to focus more on like the brief solution focused approach, right? Like we're dealing with your communication at work. We're dealing with your time management. We're dealing with, personality conflicts. Like we're just like, we're spot shooting a lot of this stuff. And
Mhm.
um, the parallels do work in both a benefit as well as maybe a nuisance. Because one of the books that I may refer to a corporate client may start tapping on their heartstrings, whereas I would normally want to stay more higher level with um, a book like Extreme Ownership. Not to plug that book, but something that would be more of a cognitive read and less of a heartfelt approach. Um, so there are those differences that I really try to nail down and really speak from a place of empowerment and challenge to engage their thinking more from, I guess, even a cognitive behavioral approach, or at least a cognitive therapeutic approach. to them being able to take control of or engage their teams or themselves in the change process. With counseling, man, I'm ready to rip and roll. Let's open up some of these boxes that are hiding out in your heart to see how those respective unresolved challenges are preventing you from being your highest and best self. Whereas with the corporate coaching, I'm really, to some extent, especially when it comes to working with stakeholders, such as like a private equity group that may be funding the development of their C-suite executives or their management team. I'm really looking to make sure I check those proverbial boxes to make sure that those respective people I've been entrusted with developing are growing in that direction. So I don't really have a whole lot of time to kind of like do the unfolding process of, some of the therapeutic work I may be gifted, for an insurance paying client. So for corporate work, it's really, hey, you got 6 sessions to get this person from a performance improvement plan all the way to, knocking out their numbers on a weekly or biweekly or monthly basis.
Mm. So if I'm hearing you correctly, in your corporate client population, you really have to laser it, that you identify what it is that you're going to work on and really have a very, very clear trajectory.
Absolutely. From start to finish. I mean, and 9 times out of 10, I'm enlisting the support of HR or talent development and acquisitions. Like I'm really getting some additional support from some of the corporate family, right, or the C-suite itself, in order to make sure that I've conceptualized properly what the issue is and how this person's respectively struggling in order to find that start point.
Sure. And as you develop your corporate work, I'm curious where you see yourself developing the corporate work separate from your counseling work.
I'll tell you this. What I want to see is the ability to one day stand in front of a mirror and or the public and know beyond the shadow of a doubt that the next challenge or issue that comes up in the work that I do with corporate America will be resolved within, 30 minutes to an hour of the first session. Like, that's what I want, and I feel like that's the thing that I would say that I started the conversation off with my father about being a therapist. I told him, I said, I want to find that button inside everyone that I can push and make everything go down or go away and just like provide that solution and or healing. That's my magical answer to that. I'd love to be the person that has the knowledge base, that has the experience and the information to just be able to solve and resolve those respective challenges that corporate America is having with being a human leader. I'd love to have that. That would be the ideal place.
And with that vision, I'm curious what helps you sharpen your skills and keep moving in this direction that and the vision that you have for yourself.
I do a lot of reading. A lot, right? And I feel like that's probably a blessing and a curse from the vantage point of it demands quite a bit from me as it relates to time, and sometimes being able to kind of let that information percolate and settle into myself can be a bit of a challenge. But I would say reading and investigating, right? I ask a lot of questions of a lot of leaders. I had lunch with the mayor of Fort Lauderdale last Friday, and it's always just interesting to hear how someone got to where they are, how they're sustaining that success, and what are some of those barriers or struggles that they're dealing with that keep them from getting to the next level, or that they're working through in order to arrive at the next place in their journey. And I think a myriad of those respective things just kind of come up as being my current work to get better at who I am, or becoming who I'd like to be, right?
When you were talking about the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, what it reminded me of is those people who cross our paths who really inspire us and who say something or embody something that really turns us on in different ways. And my therapist was talking with me about the idea of bookending the day, that the beginning of the day is a tone setter and the end of the day is a tone setter. And I used to end my day, and I still do sometimes, with a sitcom. My sitcoms are kind of like a sedative for me. But he suggested that I get a book that's inspiring, whether it be a biography, autobiography, anything that really is that kind of inspirational reading. And I don't do enough of it, I admit. But I think the idea is really significant because it sounds like your investment in your books and in your reading is what helps sharpen your skills all the time.
All the time. I mean, I have a couple of different ways of taking in that knowledge. Listening to you speak about being able to, listen to and watch sitcoms, it feeds me just like it feeds you, right? I also, have a degree of levity that I introduce into my day, which is, watching sports. But when I'm trying to, when I'm trying to get that next nugget, I feel it's my responsibility to make sure that I have that for the next person I talk with, the next leader that I'm coaching, the
Sure.
next team that I'm working with. There's nothing worse than sitting there, being looked at as a person that is theoretically supposed to have an answer or a possible solution,
Mm-hmm.
and you're fumbling with words, or you tell them, I'm gonna have to get back to you. I didn't like it at the beginning, and I for damn sure try to stay away from it currently. So,
Mm-hmm. So we're almost out of time, but I have a question that I ask generally at the end of our episodes, and it goes like this. If there's a particular takeaway or takeaways that you would like our listeners to take with them from our conversation, what might they be? What would be something in particular that you would hope they would take with them?
stay versatile. The world needs you agile. And I say that just like really clear. The amount of agility that I really feel most of us don't even understand or know that we have inside of us is immeasurable. I never knew that I'd be in this position that I'm in currently when I first started back with finishing up my undergrad, or when I, was growing up as a child. There were various things that was preparing me for a life that I never knew existed, and/or opportunities that I never knew would come. But the best thing that I've been able to do over the course of my, last 10 to 20 years is to be able to look up and say yes when things were presented, and I was able to get some good guidance. Me saying yes gave me an opportunity to grow into someone that I never imagined possible. My life is what it is, which is beyond my wildest dreams, and that's because of the fact that I've been able to stay versatile, and agile. I would say that would probably be the biggest thing, especially for any of the therapists that are listening out there. Life sometimes calls us to actually do something larger than what we ever imagined, and it does call for us to be agile.
And if I can add to what you said, which I think is so significant, it's also important for those in recovery, especially long-term recovery, to be versatile and agile and to have that kind of ability to sometimes go with, basically to live life on life's terms, but to be able to go with the detours that are inevitable, and to know that there's something there to learn, and there's always something there to learn. So I really appreciate those words of versatility and agility that we don't often talk about actually on the podcast, but that's a beautiful way to end. So with that said, I just want to thank you again, Cliff, for joining us today. It's so terrific to have you be a part of today's conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you, Andrew.
All right, you take good care. Thanks for listening today. If you're so inclined, please give us a 5-star rating and be sure to subscribe and share my podcast with those who may benefit. I look forward to you joining us the next time, and don't forget to stay connected.